Welcome to Chapter 18. This is a very brief chapter, but the CPA guidelines tell us that they want us to talk a bit about dividend policy and how that affects retained earnings. Now, it is the prerogative of the board of directors to set a dividend policy. There's been discussion in the area of finance whether different dividend policies affect share prices. And there is some theory that it doesn't matter what your policy is as long as you have one. So certain corporations like Amazon do not pay dividends. Apple does not pay dividends. Microsoft for a long time did not pay dividends. It's only been the last 10 to 15 years that they have paid a dividend. And so we will talk about a couple different policies, and especially what is referred to as the ratios. The two ratios are the payout ratio and the plowback ratio. So in this particular case, the payout ratio is simply the dividend per share divided by earnings per share. So what percentage of your earnings do you pay to your shareholders? It's not shown here, but the plowback ratio is 1 minus the payout ratio. So if you don't give it to your shareholders, you keep it. In the same way as in economics, you learned you either consume the money or you have savings, which you know is deferred consumption. Now, in this case, the yield rate is you take the dividend and you divide it by the share price. And we've done this several times starting in chapter 10, 11 in particular. Now, dividend stability is important. Even though earnings will fluctuate, it is felt that dividends need to be predictable because, as you learn in chapter 13, if you have a higher risk means there's more volatility. So what companies will like to do, a lot of them will set fairly low dividends and just keep them. So even when poor economic times come along, which they always do, you can still pay the dividend. Shareholders and investors, such as mutual funds and pension funds, rely on getting a certain amount of income based on those dividends. And if you start increasing and then decreasing, they don't know what to expect, and they don't like that. So a lot of companies will set fairly low dividends, and then if they are making extra profits and they don't have anything internally to do with that, they'll pay a special dividend, but it's kind of like getting a bonus. So when you have a certain hourly rate, and then all of a sudden company does well and they give their employees a bonus. Here's an example of some of the dividend payouts for a lot of companies. You see the percentages, you see the amounts for Bank of Montreal, Canadian Tire. You can see that Bank of Montreal pays out a fairly high percentage. Canadian Tire, because their income or earnings will fluctuate a lot more, has a lower dividend payout. Air Canada does not pay out dividends. BCE has very high payouts, and BlackBerry does not pay dividends. So those are just some examples based on different companies, but you can see for the most part, the payout ratio stays fairly consistent. That was the point of showing you this slide. Thank you for listening. That's the end of chapter number 18. We only have one calculation to do, so we'll go and do that.